Welcome to Inspiramais 2022 Underline 2. From July 13th through the 16th, the room will gather solutions in innovation, design, and sustainability and present novelties for the 2022 Underline 2 season. Segments such as footwear, accessories, apparel, furniture, and costume jewelry. During these 4 days of events, you have access to the launch of over 1,000 materials and solutions for the fashion sector. You also have access to a set of full lectures full of content and inspiration for your collection. In this edition, we also have major novelty from July 13th to the 15th from 9 o'clock to 5 p.m. We'll have an exhibit of Abi Calçados in Novo Hamburgo. If you're interested in participating, contact the Asintecal team through the Talk to Us. Inspiramais has the sponsorship of Cipatex, Altero, BASF, Bertex, Branil, Brisa, Caimila Yazon, Camaleoa, Poligraph, Endutex Brasil, FCC, Grupo Stickfran, JR Soluções, Leather Labs, OTB Soares and York. Organized by Brazil, Tex Brazil, Brazilian Leather, Brazilian Furniture. Partnership with Sebrae, promoted by Asintecal, Abit, CICB, Abimóvel, and Apex Brasil. To begin our presentation, we'd like to invite Walter Rodrigues, the coordinator of the Research and Design Nucleus of Inspiramais, who will present the lecture for Inspiration 2022 Underline 2, Future Proof, regarding the 10% of the methodology. But first, let's watch a video of our partner Sebrae Nacional and the master sponsor of Inspiramais, Cipatex. Day or night? Science or humanities? City or the field? Making choices means winning some of the greatest desires of humanity, independence. And Sebrae believes that being an entrepreneur is a way to independence, open to people of all ages, genders, and that seeks more options for people's lives. Sebrae, just as important as encouraging businesses, is supporting people in their dreams and life projects to generate jobs, develop your community, and transmit an entrepreneurial culture throughout the country, a place where everyone has the freedom to choose, including the choice to be an entrepreneur. Sebrae, the strength of the Brazilian entrepreneur. Time. Everything changes. Everything transforms. It even changes our way of seeing time. The more it goes by, the more valuable it becomes to us. The more we respect it, and the more we understand it. It's in its hands that we receive the most valuable present that life gives us, experience. And it's what reveals to us the greatest secret of all, that time, in fact, is not the division between past, present, and future, but the sum of these three elements, with a result that is eternal: the art, the feelings, the soul. And it is this temporal idea that inspires our fashion, translating the beauty that lives forever. Come and discover this at Inspiramais 2022. Hello, welcome. Thank you, Camila. We continue here. Good morning to everyone. We're here at Inspiramais. We're now going to present Future Proof, which is the 10% of our program, Inspiramais. I want to start by explaining the product pyramid. The 10% is where we are now, talking about laboratories and experience, and especially innovation. Here, we'll generate value, where we can bet on exactly what we think is good for our product. 30%, we will generate assertiveness, processing this innovation, taking this innovation to another level. And after that, we will validate this with price and competitiveness in the 60%, massifying this innovation and bringing it to the ample market. This happens all the time. It's a cycle that moves, and applying this to this product pyramid, the methodology, will bring you more ability and perception of the product and how you can communicate this on your social networks and how you will present this, for example, in your catalog, where you always use the 10% valuing your brand. So let's continue. Here at Future Proof, we're talking about a very important moment, this rebound, which is happening in the near future, the future of tomorrow. So, looking at this important moment in time, we asked a question that it's extremely easy to think about in this current moment, but oftentimes hard to answer, which is, what is the key for transformation in the fashion industry? It was really incredible that in the group meeting, we realized that the major answer is a product and a company to be relevant. Being relevant is to translate feelings into materials and products, then making them desired and necessary. But in the future, it will be necessary to inject a huge dose of purpose into our brand in the perception of a combination of talking to others, because this is what this moment requires. For a product to be remembered in the future, it must be very well connected with all these relevant issues of the current time. We're going to start with the word quantum, which is one of the topics which we developed. Quantum means the smallest part of each cell or anything you can imagine, the smallest amount of anything in the human body or in any material. For us, poetically, quantum is what we call the essence. Within the essence, it can appear as fragmented, which is a second word that we've worked on, the idea of opposing textures and finishing. Inspiration comes from the work of Mona Hatoum. This clock is a work of art. At the same time, while one of the hands creates all these textures on the sand, the next hand erases it, giving it a very clear direction of the moment that we're living in, of the speed of which everything is happening, the velocity of information, the velocity of everything that's happening. So it's a work that captures this moment that we're experiencing. And this becomes connected with various pathways of fashion. So these textures and part of the products end up being a very interesting benchmark for the creation of materials and end products. We have here a contrast between the smooth and the textured, or the textured on a lighter layer, almost like a fade of textures, or even a combination of various textures in one product. Another important point are the fragments of materials, where we have the possibility to work with denim in upcycling or recycling of materials. This is another important point. What we understand about the future, the reuse of materials that already exist. Another important aspect of this fragmented aspect is looking at the science of stones and precious stones. We see a video here of a designer, Carol, working with glass that she builds based off of stones, and how we can perceive this in international collections, the use of prints with stones and precious stones in clothes and accessories. Here, in a certain way, we have another table of Carol talking about agate and the colors and how this inspires and conducts us to think about materials and products. Another important word for us within Future Proof is sports, especially because at this time we've talked a lot about sports to move us away from this idea of a home office. So we need to have action and movement. And it's also important for us to think that beyond everything else, we have the Olympics this year in Japan. There'll be a huge load of energy and information about this, and even more so, many of the casual brands and even luxury brands are incorporating into their daily use and collection many elements from sports. So it's important for us to remember materials that are perfect for performance and sports, comfort, technology, and involving the body and interaction with sweat. So materials need to have these elements. And we'll discover this in the styles and products. And there's a speed implicit in the cuts, and there's a dynamism in the use of colors and shapes, and the adaptation of this sense of sports within elements of casual. Another important point is for us to observe the uniforms of all the Olympic teams. We have this example from Sierra Leone, where they used the characteristics of the country and transfer this into their uniforms. This combination of tradition and performance. This is done very well at this time. We have one of the coolest examples happening with Nike's efforts, which explores very clearly all these cultural and religious differences, producing materials for all kinds of people. Obviously, technology in the soles of shoes and footwear impacts the future, as well as fabrics for bathing suits and fitness clothing. Sierra, who's a young French designer, has done excellent and elegant work that's very interesting with sports material in her casual collection. Here we can see the importance of the cuts and the collection of colors, which brings a sport-like inspiration within high luxury pieces or even casual pieces. You see that even pets are undergoing this trend, and they take on their sports personality through their clothes. Another idea of future-proof is the idea of deboning, removing the structure with extreme softness and fluidity. And we'll see this in the shapes even of furniture, with this more pleated leather or this Loewe textiles and the movement of leather in the bags and in Sportmax clothes, where we have a very strong lines perceiving the delicate nature of this hide. We continue to interpret this in furniture and accessories, and especially in the collection of Yamamoto, where we see this sometimes structured, but very much defining this idea of fluidity. Here, in a certain sense, the objectives, the furniture, the footwear, and the modeling of the clothing reflects this idea of volume, but without a structure, thus giving evidence of the deboning idea. We can also have the idea of hollowness, where you have these empty spaces. We have a very interesting example in this clothing, which is made with leather details, almost like it's a weave that's built from the residue or waste. We see this in Sol's pet clothing and Valentino's knit, where the idea is to make this silhouette lighter, causing a great impact. Our second important topic for future-proof is hypervisual. And we're going to talk here about a contrast of this idea of the essence that we've been working with so far. Here in hypervisual, we're going to talk about maximalism, graphics, hackers, and geeks, which is basically this culture which involves the whole digital realm and especially gamers. One of the major sources of inspiration here were the series on TV that we've seen recently, where there's this explosion of color and movement that ends up bringing a reference of youth and especially energy, which is something that we need a lot of in this rebound phase and in new moments of inspiration. This light, this effect of the light on the screen ends up influencing our vision and the choices that we will show coming up. For example, when we talk about hackers and geeks, we're talking about very innovative models with appearances that make us think about games and structure with lots of lighting and effects. We have a strong aspect of opiarte, bringing Marcelli once again here, showing prints in these overalls that are next to the body, bringing this stamp, this print with volume effects in the prints, with colors, and especially in furniture, with an idea that's very full of movement and fun. We see the impact of colors in how we're working with this color palette with holographic effects or almost holographic effects, but in a manner that's much more delicate here in the appearance, creating these geometric elements that are interesting, or stripes that multiply and mix, also creating the idea of movement. After all, the main part of games is this interaction of movement. Another important aspect is graphics. We were very inspired by the retrospective that the Pinacoteca in São Paulo did with the work of the twins, these Brazilian artists known throughout the world, which bring in their graffiti a very strong element in their personas, worked with different colors and ideas of various graphics. So we made a connection with what's happening throughout the world, because after all, we live the zeitgeist all the time. And so we've discovered this in other brands such as Prada, Loverboy, and we see this combination of these graphics, which is so important this season. We can imagine these graphics being more accentuated in different sizes, but with a volume of colors that match, making these interesting contrasts. And also we have the joining of white and black, sometimes with color or sometimes alone in black and white, with great weaves and movement, remembering the hoppy art of the 60s. Another important topic that refers to anthropology and integration is ancestrality. This enters the thinking that during the pandemic, places were closed, borders were closed, and it was hard to import materials and products. And this directed our thinking to ideas of tribes, and these tribes fostered from the location where we live and the need to think that we need to have a more clear idea of everything we produce, to not be so dependent on other places. This idea of non-dependence strengthens this perception of who we are, so that ancestrality begins to bloom. We're going to talk a lot about the African matrix, because there's a discussion throughout the world of the importance of thinking about others, and especially the African matrix in all the continents of America. There's a strong voice through the protests that we've seen throughout the world in relation to this, and obviously this impacts our market and especially our Brazilian consumers, where 54% of our population reflects this African matrix. An example of this is Machosa, which is an African designer that works with ancestrality not only in clothing but in accessories, furniture, emphasizing the need to talk and communicate your ancestrality through fashion. And this, in reality, provides positive fruit. And another important point, and this will be presented in detail, is the work of Loe brand, women in Kenya who have established a combination of accessories and products which were made in partnership and collaboration of this luxury brand with this Naftai tribe in the middle of Kenya. So it's really interesting for us to perceive how designers are using, for example, Louis Vuitton put on the runways many of these ancestral robes coming from the African matrix. Another important point for us in Brazil is to understand the original peoples and how these graphics and how these prints can actually translate feelings and a perception of sharing affection. By looking at these cultures that have centuries of history, we have interesting examples like Cocum Brasil developing products using original designs from the indigenous tribes, and where all the profits are reverted back to the generation of more technology and well-being and better quality of life for the original peoples. We have Asteridofas, who's doing a great work with rubber, and the path that we have for all these weaves, establishing a fashion language within an essence that we believe as Brazilians. Another important point for us to recognize is Latin America as a whole, from the original peoples in the United States, including all the others in Latin America, where their colors and weaves and designs can be used and transformed into products. We also notice that European brands, in a collaboration effort with designers in these ethnicities, has brought within their product many of these super current references, super interesting, of ancestrality. Here is a very interesting example. Tom van der Boord, who is a Belgian designer. Belgium has a past of colonialism, especially in Africa, that is quite significant, and he brings these references. And what's even cooler about his work, which you should really get to know, is that he works with recycling. Most of the material and the applications and embroidery is done with materials that are in use. And here, we're going to present to you the future-proof color chart. We have the three main colors, which is scuba blue, yellow iris, and purple heather. These three colors are what we're betting on within our project of Inspiramais. And now, I will share the floor to see the materials that are being presented. So at this time, I invite you to discover the materials that were developed by our members for the exhibit of Inspiramais. Hello, we're back, and this is the moment that I most enjoy in Inspiramais, where we can understand how all those inspirations end up being translated into materials through the efforts of our design managers who accompany the Inspiramais program. So I'd like to present to you at this time the idea of quantum and how this was decodified into materials. We can perceive the use of stone prints, which I mentioned to you previously, and the fragmentation, the idea of parts of the product having textures and part of them being smooth. And here, applied into the color chart, which are the three colors of the 10%. And after that, here we have exactly a part of the hypervisual, which is very interesting, where we see the use of color and shine, as I mentioned in the culture of gaming, and how we can see the use of these combinations of contrasts and graphics and geometric elements that go from the adornments, the souls, and the materials. And so, to finish this presentation of the materials, we have ancestrality, where we can see within the elements of the African culture and elements that also include the original peoples of Brazil used in the future-proof color chart. Here, you can see with me the materials, and I'd like to invite you to also be with me, seeing 30% tomorrow. Tomorrow I will present the entire methodology of the pyramid once every day. So you can see with me the entire development of the Inspiramais program based off these materials. Bye, and see you next time.